When I meet someone new and tell them I'm from India, one of the first questions they ask me is, "Oh, don't you love spicy food?" You loved the last video I made dispelling 5 myths about Indian food. So here are 5 more from least to most annoying. I can make a whole video about the last one, so stick around till the end to find out what it is. Number 1. Indian food is mostly vegetarian. While a third of the population of India is vegetarian, 2/3 is not. The food I grew up eating almost always consisted of meat or seafood. In fact, food and ingredients are labeled as vegetarian and non-vegetarian wherever you go in India. India is majority Hindu and a lot of Hindus are vegetarian. However, India is a diverse country with at least 6 other religious groups and meat is an essential part of their diet. Bengali food has a plethora of non-vegetarian offerings. Parts of South India boast of a vibrant meat-eating culture, and we can't forget North India with its variety of grilled dishes cooked in the traditional clay oven called tandoor. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the vegetarian food that we get back home, and no one can even come close to the variety and deliciousness of vegetarian food that India has to offer. But Indian food is a lot more than just vegetables. Number 2. Indian food takes hours to prepare. I partially agree with this one, which is why it's number 2 on my annoyance list. Time is an essential ingredient in Indian cooking. However, not all dishes take hours to prepare. It depends, like in other cuisines, on what the main ingredient of the dish is. Lasagna, for instance, takes hours to prepare, but carbonara comes together in minutes. The main thing that annoys me about this myth is that it prevents people that aren't familiar with cooking Indian food from trying it at home. I love the food I grew up eating, and I want more and more people to experience it, and this myth prevents that from happening. That's exactly the reason why I'm featuring these dishes on my private dining experience that I just launched in Las Vegas. I'll put a link down below in case you're interested. Number 3. You need 100 spices to cook Indian food. This one annoys me more than I thought it would, but the last one makes me angry. Most of the dishes that people love in the US can be made with less than 10 spices. Spices are easily accessible in grocery stores all over the US. They last for months and they are mostly relatively inexpensive. In fact, you can 10x the flavor of your spices by dry roasting them. I actually made a video talking about how to do that and show you the techniques. I'll leave a link down below in case you want to breathe new life into those old spices hanging out in the back of your cabinet. The spices I deem essential for everyday Indian cooking are cumin, coriander, red chili, turmeric, and garam masala. If you have these, you can cook an Indian dish every day for months. Number 4. Indian food is oily and unhealthy. I get where people are coming from because you can see a pool of oil floating on top of Indian dishes in most average Indian restaurants in the US. I suspect that sometimes the cooks add a splash of oil on top of the finished dish to make it look rich and glossy. I guess the idea is to make the dish look more appetizing, but what they're trying to replicate doesn't come from adding more oil on top of the dish. It comes from cooking the base of the sauce for a long time on low heat so that the water content of the sauce reduces, and that allows fat separation to happen and intensifies the flavor of the sauce. We indulged heavily on our trip to India earlier this year, and I'm happy to report that I didn't gain a single pound. Number 5. Only Indians are allowed to cook Indian food. Every time I see this on social media, my blood pressure rises. My purpose in life is to help as many people as possible to discover the beauty of Indian cuisine and to incorporate it into their day-to-day lives. This myth prevents that from happening. Of course, I don't want people taking unnecessary shortcuts and changing the dishes to a point where their essence is lost. But you don't have to be Indian to cook Indian food.
We're gonna take heavy cream, whipped cream. We're gonna add 1 cup.
Do you know what 1 cup mean? 1 cup and then you pour the whole cow in there. Hiya.
One of my favorite chefs on the internet is Jake from Plant Future. He cooks these obscure, hyper-regional Indian dishes, some of which I haven't even heard of. Clearly, he's fascinated by Indian food and has deep expertise and knowledge. And guess what? He's not Indian. This is just one example, and there are many more instances of cooks dedicating themselves to the craft of cooking the cuisines they love, regardless of their background. Now that truly makes me happy. I wholeheartedly agree with what Anthony Bourdain said. Food for me has always been an adventure. I hope it's the same for you. Like the video and subscribe to my channel if you want to dive into the depths of Indian cuisine and culture.